The sky above the alien city was bright with twin moons. As the human walked through the wide plaza, his boots made no sound on the polished stone. The alien guards watched him with cold glowing eyes, their armor shining with gold and red. He was not welcome here, not really, but he had come anyway, because he knew what waited out there. In the dark, his name was Reed, and he was not a soldier. He was not a leader, he was just a human scientist, but his voice carried weight on Earth, and now he had crossed the stars to speak before the High Council of the Zelari Empire. They were tall and proud, with silver skin and long hair that shimmered like metal. They believed humans were weak. They believed danger could not touch them. Reed stood in the center of their chamber and held up a data tablet. It showed a strange pulse, deep under the surface of Etherian, a dead moon that circled a cold blue star. The readings were not natural, not made by wind or quake. They were rhythmic like a heartbeat. Something was alive under that stone, and it had been there a very long time. You must not go there, Reed said, his voice strong and clear. Something was buried, and now it is waking. If you disturb it, it will not stay asleep. The council stared in silence. Then a ripple of laughter moved through them. One of them stood. He was tall, even for a Zelari. His name was Captain Vale. His voice was loud and smooth, and full of pride. He smiled as if the human were a child with a ghost story. Do you come here to scare us with old myths? He said. We are explorers. We are warriors. We do not fear bumps in the dark. Reed did not smile. He looked around the chamber at all the serious faces. Then he saw one that was different. It was a young alien girl with short, dark hair. Her armor was plain. Her hands were clenched behind her back. Her eyes were locked on him, not mocking, not smiling, just watching. Her name was Erica. Reed turned back to Vale and said, I have studied this for years. There are patterns from ancient systems all around that moon. They all show one thing. Something was sealed. They're not by humans, by something older, something afraid. Another council member laughed again. This is not Earth. We do not run from shadows. Vale stepped forward, his voice now sharp. You bring fear here, and call it science. We will go to Etherian, and we will find your little ghost, and we will return with proof that humans still tremble in the dark. Reed took a deep breath. He knew they would not listen. He had seen it in the way they held their heads high. He had seen it in the way they smirked when he walked in, but he had to try one more time. You go, he said, and his voice was quiet now. Something will answer you, and when it does, you will not like what it say. Sarika flinched slightly at his words, but said nothing. Vale raised his hand and waved the guards forward. Take the human back to his ship. Tell him we will send him news from Etherian once we find his ghost. As they led him out, returned and looked one last time at the silent girl with the dark eyes. He did not know her name then, but he hoped she had heard him, truly heard him. The next day, the alien ship took off its engines, humming through the clouds. It shimmered like a silver spear, flying into the dark sky toward the dead moon from the surface of Earth's small embassy. Reed watched it vanish into the black, and he whispered to himself again, the words that had haunted his dreams. For weeks they are not ready inside the alien ship. Vale sat in the command chair. His team moved around him, confident, fast, proud. He gave the order to prepare landing. They would set down on the cold surface of Etherian and begin their scan. Arika sat at the edge of the crew deck, her fingers tracing the old lines on her blade. She thought about the human the way he had looked, not angry, not proud, just full of something deep and sharp fear. She had never seen fear in a human before, not like that. Outside the ship, the stars watched in silence, and the moon below waited. It had waited for a long time. It had no voice, but it remembered the ones who had come long ago, and it remembered how they had dawned. Far below the surface, something stirred in the dark and began to listen. Again, it had been so quiet for so long, but now it could feel voices again, and it was hungry. The alien ship broke through the thin clouds of Etherian and touched down on a wide black plain of stone. The sky above was empty, the stars far and cold. The wind blew across the surface without sound, without warmth, without life. The crew stepped out in silver suits, their boots pressing into dust that had not been disturbed in 1,000 years. Captain Vale walked at the front, his voice calm and steady. As he gave orders to the others, their scanners moved back and forth, looking for energy signals, movement, heat, anything that would prove the human was wrong, anything that would make Reed's warning seem foolish. Harika moved with them, her eyes scanning the horizon, her hands near her weapon, her thoughts still echoing with the memory of the human's voice. He had not sounded proud or desperate. He had sounded like someone who knew what waited beneath the stone. They found nothing for the first hour. Just flat rock, strange ruins, old towers, broken and silent walls, with markings no one could read, and strange black crystals growing in the corners of the shattered buildings. Their shapes like hands reaching out of the stone. Veil laughed again, as he walked past them, calling them pretty decorations from an old forgotten people. He raised his voice and shouted into the empty sky. Where is your ghost, human? I see nothing but rocks. and when one of the soldiers named Kel moved toward a narrow tunnel leading down into the stone, he waved his light inside, and called back, "There is a path down here, it goes deep, it looks like it leads to a chamber." Or Prevails ordered him to enter the rest, followed in pairs. The narrow tunnel curved down, like a spiral, its walls smooth, and Erika moved near the rear, her helmet lights bouncing off the stone. As they went deeper with every step, the air grew heavy, the light thinner, the quiet deeper. After 10 minutes they entered a vast chamber. Under the ground, tall columns of stone reached up into darkness. The floor was cracked and dry, symbols covered the walls, glowing faintly with a soft blue light like veins in the stone, pulsing with a rhythm too slow to notice at first. Kel moved to the far side of the room, his scanner blinking red. Suddenly he froze, then called back, "Something is wrong here. My suit is getting strange readings. Something is interfering with the signal." Before anyone could answer, the chamber lights dimmed, the air turned colder, a low hum began to rise from the floor, and then Kel screamed. It was not a scream of pain, not a scream of fear, it was something else. Something full of confusion and terror, and something more ancient, as if it was not just his voice screaming, but something inside him trying to get out. The team ran toward him, but he was already gone. His helmet lay on the ground, cracked open, no sign of blood, no sign of his body, just the faint sound of breathing echoing in the stone veil. Ordered the team to fall back to the surface, but the tunnel behind them was gone. A wall had closed over it, without sound, without warning, like the stone itself had swallowed it. "We'll find another way," he said, but his voice no longer had that proud tone it had before. Erika knelt near the cracked helmet, her fingers brushing the stone. She could feel something beneath it, not just heat or pressure, something living, something watching her from behind the wall. From beneath the floor, the symbols on the walls began to pulse faster, the hum grew louder, the stone under their feet trembled, not like an earthquake, but like something breathing, something alive, waking slowly, and remembering its hunger. They moved quickly now, finding another path, another tunnel that led deeper. Veil refused to stop, refused to admit fear. He told them they would find Kel. He told them there was no creature here, no ancient danger, just tricks of sound and rock. But then another scream came, this one from behind a soldier named Tren, who had stayed near the rear. He was there one moment, gone the next, not taken by claws or teeth, just vanished into the wall, like smoke in the wind. The team was smaller now, moving faster, lights shaking, weapons drawn, but no enemy in sight. Just the same walls, the same quiet breath beneath the stone, the same sense that they were not alone. Erika turned a corner and found a doorway that pulsed with soft light. A strange sound came from within, not a hum, not a voice, something like a memory, something like music from a dream. She stepped forward, her hand reaching toward the frame behind her. Veil shouted for her to stop, but it was too late. The doorway opened with a slow hiss, and inside she saw shapes moving, not clearly, not fully, like shadows swimming through air. And then she heard it, a whisper, not with her ears, but with her mind, her name spoken in a voice that sounded like her own, like her mother, like Reed, like something she could not name. She staggered back, her heart pounding, her breath loud in the helmet. The doorway closed again, sealing the shadows inside, but the whisper stayed inside her head, repeating her name over and over, like a question, like a promise. The others did not believe her. They said it was the pressure, the fear, the stress of the missing crew. But Erika knew what she had felt, what she had heard. This place was not just a ruin, it was a cage, and something inside it had just noticed the lock was breaking. The sound came again, not through the ears, but straight into the chest, a deep pulse, like a broken drum, like something ancient, moving under the ground. The soldiers looked at each other, not speaking, not breathing, for a long second. Then one of them shouted for light, and the walls around them lit up in blue veins that pulsed with life. Erika held her weapon close, but it felt small against the feeling in her bones. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper, like her body knew, something her mind could not explain. Her helmet lights flickered, and she saw shadows dancing across the far wall, not shaped like people, not shaped like any life. She knew Captain Veil raised his arm and ordered the squad to form a line, but his voice cracked as if the echo of the last scream still burned inside his throat. He had always been a proud voice, a loud one, but now it shook, as if the stone itself was pressing against his chest. The group moved forward carefully through a low tunnel, with walls that seemed to breathe each breath, sending a thin mist into the air. The scanners no longer worked. The signals were broken. The maps were wrong. It was like the moon was shifting around them, like it did not want them to leave. They entered a chamber shaped like a circle with smooth black walls and no ceiling. Just a pit of stars above that could not be real, because they were far below the surface, and yet there the stars were moving, spinning, watching. In the center of the room stood a tall crystal, black as void and sharp as glass. It pulsed with each heartbeat. Erika could feel hers slow down. As she stared at it, the others moved toward it. Drawn by something unseen, one soldier reached out to touch it, and then screamed. It was not just his scream, but hundreds layered on top of each other, screams of people, screams of children, screams that did not sound alive anymore. They filled the chamber, poured out of the crystal, poured into their helmets, poured into their men. Dropped to her knees, hands over her head, trying to shut out the voices, but they kept coming. Some whispered in old languages. Some laughed, some begged, but they all had the same message. You should not be here. The soldier who touched the crystal was gone, not burned, not torn apart, just gone. His armor lay empty, as if he had turned to air, and floated away. Only his scream remained, bouncing off the walls like a broken song veil. Pulled Erika up and shouted for the team to move, but there was no exit now. The tunnel behind them was sealed, and the crystal was glowing brighter. Its surface now showing faces pressed against the glass faces. Screaming mouths, wide eyes filled with pain and hunger. They backed away slowly, but the floor beneath them cracked open just enough to let out a sound like breathing. Like growling, like something waking from sleep. It was not a monster. It was not a beast. It was something worse, something that remembered pain and wanted to share it. One soldier fired at the crystal. The blast hit, but the energy was swallowed, and a second later the same beam shot back and hit him in the chest. Armor melted, eyes wide. He fell without sound. No time to scream, no time to move. Veil cursed and turned his come on, trying to reach orbit, but there was nothing, only static, only the same soft voice repeating the same words in every channel. Return. Return, return, over and over, like a warning or a command. Darika felt something shift inside her, like a cold hand brushing her thoughts. She remembered her childhood, her father teaching her how to fight, her mother laughing by the fire, and then she saw something else, a ruin not from this world, a war not from this time. Voices that were not hers, but they filled her head. Like her own memories, she saw an alien race older than stars, building this place, building this prison, burying it in a dead moon, sealing it with blood and metal and silence. And now that silence was broken, and the prisoner was stirring. The walls began to crack, the ceiling of stars blinked away, and true darkness filled the room, the kind of dark that eats light, the kind that listens, the kind that waits. Veil shouted again, ordering them to hold position. But his voice was swallowed by the dark. One by one, the lights of the helmets shut off, not from damage, not from failure, but as if the moon itself had decided to close its eyes. In the pitch black, Erika could hear breathing, not hers, not the others, something behind her, something above her, something below. And then the scream came again. This time it was her name, drawn out, long and low and full of hunger. She closed her eyes and whispered the only word she could think of, the only word that still meant safety. Humans. Somewhere out in space the signal reached Reed's ship, weak and broken, but enough. And in the heart of the dead moon, a thing that should never have heard a name spoke it back in a voice made of every scream it had ever swallowed. Asterisk. The black mist moved like water, without shape, without weight, without mercy. It drifted from the cracks in the stone, like it had waited years to be free, and now it searched for warmth, for thought, for sound, anything it could taste, anything it could claim. Erika held her breath as the mist passed her visor. It was cold, but not with ice. It was cold with memory, like standing in a forgotten grave, like touching something that remembered you before you were born. Her fingers twitched, but she dared not move. Her mind screamed, but her lips stayed sealed. Veil stood nearby, frozen not with fear but with disbelief. His proud chest now silent, his weapon lowered, his mouth open, but no words came, as if his voice had been taken by the dark, as if the air itself no longer belonged to him. The mist gathered in the center of the chamber, and took a form not solid, not real, something in between, something wrong. Arms without joints, a face without eyes, a body that bent in ways that broke rules of nature and time. It was not a creature. It was a mistake given life, a curse given Pit reached toward the crystal that still pulsed in the floor, and the crystal responded with a deep moan like metal breaking, like mountains crying. The faces inside the glass screamed again, this time louder, this time not just in pain but in rage, as if they knew what was coming, as if they had felt it before. Erika stumbled backward, her boots sliding on smooth stone, her eyes locked on the thing that rose from the center. It did not walk, it did not float, it just moved, as if distance and gravity meant nothing. It came closer, and her thoughts grew heavy, not with fear, but with noise. Thoughts that were not hers began to whisper inside her head, voices of people she never met, dreams she never dreamed, and memories that came from the stars. She tried to shut it out, tried to focus on the sound of her breath, tried to remember the human's voice, tried to remember that warning, the look in his eyes, the way he had said those words, as if he had seen this already, as if this moment was not new, but repeated. Veil snapped out of his trance and opened fire. His shots burned through the air, hitting the black form again and again. But it did not stop, it did not scream, it did not even notice. The blasts just kept moving, as if bullets were nothing more than wind. One of the soldiers screamed and ran toward the tunnel, but the floor opened beneath him, and the darkness swallowed him whole. No sound, no struggle, just gone. The chamber closed again like nothing had moved, like nothing had been lost. Eureka turned and ran toward the far side of the room, her fingers brushing against old markings carved into the wall, symbols that matched the ones on the human's datapad, the same ones that Council had ignored, the same ones Vale had laughed at. She pressed her palm against them, and the wall lit up with gold lines, ancient writing pulsing with slow fire. The thing stopped, the mist turned, the whispers paused, and the air grew still, as if the entire moon had noticed her hand on that wall, as if it remembered the language, as if it remembered Foray. Door slid open, revealing a small room filled with old tech, not Zelari, not human, something older, something smarter. It was lined with rings that floated in the air, spinning around a broken core that hummed with fading power. At the center was a chair, and beside it, a helmet shaped for a different head. One too long, too narrow, with holes where ears should not be. She stepped inside, as Vale shouted behind her, told her to stop, told her to fall back, but she ignored him. She sat in the chair and placed the helmet over her head. Pain rushed into her skull, heat and sound and memory, filling her with images of war, of fire, of voices screaming in alien tongues, of one last desperate act to trap the unkillable. She saw them die one by one, as they sealed the thing inside. This moon, locking it away with machines and blood, using their own minds as keys, each one choosing to burn rather than let it escape. And now that lock was weak, now the machine was broken, now the whispers had begun again. She screamed, but the sound stayed. Inside, her thoughts twisted and broke and reformed as the helmet fed her knowledge that no one should hold Vale. Dragged her out, eyes wide, asking if she was still her, asking if she was real, and not just another voice inside the thing's hunger. She nodded once, but her eyes glowed now with something new, something left behind by the memory of a dead race. Something sharp. The creature turned toward them, and for the first time, it paused, as if curious, as if sensing the change, as if it saw something familiar in her that reminded it of the jailers who came before. Eureka stood tall and spoke one word, not from her voice, but from the voice of the ones who had trapped it. A name that cracked the stone, a name that made the faces in the crystal fall silent, a name the thing had not heard in ages. And the moon trembled, as if waking to war once more. The chamber was quiet but not empty. The thing in the center had no face, yet it stared at her. It had no mouth, yet it breathed louder than storms. Its body flickered between shadow and substance, like a memory trying to become real again. Its limbs bent like broken metal, and its voice filled the walls without a sound. Eureka stood still, her armor cracked, her mind buzzing with echoes. The helmet she wore had burned marks into her skin, symbols that glowed faintly and whispered in languages she did not know. Her thoughts felt stretched, like they were not hers, like someone else was using them, like she had become part of the machine, part of the memory, part of the moon. Captain Vale leaned against a wall, blood running from his side, his weapon limp in his hand, his proud eyes now dark with pain and disbelief. The others were gone, taken or lost or swallowed by the silence. Only he and Eureka remained, and the thing that waited and watched and listened. The air was heavy, not with heat, but with thought. She could feel it pressing against her lungs, against her bones. The whisper in her skull was louder now, not just a single voice, but many layered over each other like wind through shattered glass. It asked her name again and again, but each time she answered, it laughed, not with joy, not with cruelty, but with hunger. She stepped forward, the floor soft beneath her boots, as if the stone itself was tired, as if it wanted her to leave, or to stay forever. The creature moved with her, not walking, not flying, just following like a shadow that was too real to be a trick. The crystal pulsed again, its faces now still there, mouths open in silent screams, their eyes empty, as if they had given everything to the thing in the center, and now had nothing left to offer. She wondered if they had once stood where she stood, if they had once believed they could fight it or stop it or understand it. She reached out with her hand, not to touch it, but to feel it. Her fingers brushed the edge of its shadow, and her thoughts shattered. She saw fire, she saw war, she saw stars falling like rain. She saw cities built by hands not her own, burning under a sky that screamed. She saw a child run from a wave of black mist, and she saw that child become the thing. Before her it was not a beast, it was not a monster, it was a wound left open for too long, a soul that had been broken and twisted and forgotten. Something once noble, now rotten, something once lost, now found again by accident, by pride, by foolish hands that thought they knew better. Vel shouted her name, but it sounded far away like an echo in a dream. She turned to him and saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear he had mocked in the human, the same fear she now carried in her blood. She walked back to him slowly, and fell to one knee, her body weak, her mind screaming for rest. "We cannot kill it," she said. "We cannot fight it. Not like this." He nodded slowly, his hands shaking, his breath short. He asked what it wanted, but she did not know, or maybe she did and could not say it aloud. Maybe it wanted nothing, maybe it just wanted to be remembered, or feared, or felt then. The signal came faint and broken, a voice in her come, a human voice calling her name, not with fear, not with panic, just steady and calm and tired. Reed had found her somehow, across the stars, across the silence. He had found her. She answered her voice, low, her words barely formed, but he heard her. He told her to hold on, told her he was coming, told her he knew what to do. He had studied the lock, studied the prison, studied the thing they should never have touched. He said he had a key, but the key had a As Vale asked if she trusted him, if she trusted the human, she looked at the crystal, looked at the faces, looked at the creature that now sat still like a god waiting for worship. She said yes, she did. The whisper in her head grew angry, the air grew thick. The chamber shook as if the moon itself knew the name of the human, and feared it. The thing stood once more, its body rising like smoke, its voice now a roar inside her thoughts. It said, "No, not again, not this time, not him but..." Erika smiled. Through the pain, through the fire, through the scream that now echoed from the walls, from the floor, from her own chest. She smiled because she was not alone anymore, and the thing that waited in the dark finally knew the human was coming back, and it was afraid. The stars above the moon looked cold and silent, but they were watching, they were waiting. The ship broke through the clouds like a dagger through silk, slow, steady. Sure, it came alone, with no escort, no fleet, no warning. It came not with pride, but with purpose, not with power, but with memory inside. The ship. Reed sat with his eyes fixed on the dead moon below. His hands moved across controls, old and worn, patched together with care and hope. His face was pale, his eyes dark. Not from fear, but from knowing too much, from seeing too much, from remembering what others chose to forget. The signal had reached him. Weak and broken, like a dying breath, like a final whisper, but it was enough. Her voice was enough. The moment he heard it, he knew the thing was awake. He knew the time was short. He knew that everything he feared had come to pass. He landed the ship on a narrow ledge near the ancient ruins. The dust rose around him like smoke, like ghosts dancing in the low gravity. He stepped out in a plain suit, no colors, no rank, no armor, just a single device strapped to his chest, a black cube with red lines, glowing like veins, pulsing like a heart. He walked toward the ruins with slow steps. The wind around him felt sharp, like it carried voices, like it remembered screams. The stones beneath his boots vibrated with soft rhythms, like breath, like warning, like welcome. Erika felt it before she heard it, a warmth in her chest, a voice that broke through the noise inside her head. She stood slowly, her body weak, her thoughts still tangled, but her heart steady. The whispers pulled back, the shadow paused. Even the creature in the center turned as if it too felt the change, as if it too remembered the shape of the man who had once sealed it. Vale looked at her and asked, "What now?" But she did not answer. She just stared at the entrance, just waited for the steps she knew were coming, and then they came, slow, firm, echoing through the ancient stone halls. Not like a soldier, not like a savior. Just a man, just a human, who had returned to finish what should never have begun. Reed stepped into the chamber, and the lights flared. The symbols on the walls glowed, the crystal in the floor pulsed with sudden life. The thing that stood near the center moved its form, twisting its limbs, shaking its voice, rising in a long, low scream that made no sound, and all sounded once. He looked at it without fear, without hate. His voice was quiet, but every word struck like thunder. He said he was sorry. He said it should never have been buried here, should never have been forgotten, should never have been left alone with its pain. The whispers screamed, the mist swirled, the walls cracked, as if the moon itself rejected his presence, as if the very ground feared what he had brought. He lifted the black cube from his chest, and held it high. The red veins flared, brighter, brighter, until the room was painted in bloodlight. The creature recoiled, its form shaking, its scream becoming more frantic, more desperate. Vale shouted, asking what it was, and Erika whispered one word, a weapon not of steel, not of fire, but of memory. It was built to hold thoughts, to erase pain, to seal minds that could not be destroyed. Reed stepped forward, each step burning his skin, each breath cutting through his lungs, but he did not stop. He pressed the cube to the floor, and the ground beneath it opened like a mouth, like a wound, like the past itself. Tearing wide, the cube sank into the stone, and light burst out of every wall, every crack, every symbol, every eye of every face, locked in the crystal. The light was not warm, not cold, not bright, not dark. It was truth, it was weight, it was final. The creature screamed again, and lunged toward Red, its body stretching wide, its limbs becoming spears of dark, its voice now a roar, now a storm, now a curse, that shook the stars. But Erika moved faster. She threw herself between them, her armor cracking, her bones breaking. Her eyes locked on the shadow as she shouted a word she had learned through pain, through memory. Through fire, a name older than time, older than the stars, older. Then fear. The creature froze, the room froze, the stars froze. Reed reached out and touched the final panel on the cube. The seal completed, and the world exploded in silence. When the light faded, only dust remained. The creature was gone. The whispers were gone. The crystal was dark. The faces finally asleep. Reed fell to his knees, blood running from his nose, his breath shallow, his heart slow. Erika crawled to his side and held his hand, and for the first time in years the moon was quiet. Agnes looked around at the chamber and asked if it was over, but no one answered, because some things never end, they only sleep, and some locks never break. They only wait. And in the silence beneath the moon, a new scar formed where the old one had closed, where the human had returned, where the pain had been faced, and somewhere in the dark of space, something listened and did not smile. The moon no longer screamed, the mist no longer crawled, the walls no longer wept with the voices of the lost. The silence was deep and heavy, not cold, not peaceful, more like the silence of a battlefield after the fire has burned, and the last cry has died, more like a breath, held too long with no promise of Erika sat beside the human, her armor shattered, her skin marked with strange symbols, her mind still echoing with the last word. She had spoken a word she did not know, a word she could no longer forget. Her fingers gripped his hand tight, even though his pulse was fading, his face pale, his breath slow. The cube had done its work, but it had taken something from him, something it might never return. Vale limped toward them, his eyes hollow, his voice weak, the pride in him burned away by what he had seen, by what he had almost unleashed. He did not speak of command or victory. He only asked if the thing was truly gone, if the screams would ever return. Erika did not answer, because she did not know the truth, because some truths are too heavy for words, because some endings are not endings, only changes waiting to happen again. Reed stirred, his lips moved, but no sound came. Only a faint breath like wind through a broken gate, like memory trying to escape before the night closed in again. His eyes met hers, and something passed between them, something without shape, something stronger than fear. They carried him out of the ruins, step by step, through the dead holes, through the tunnels that now lay still, the strange lights dim and cold like stars that had watched too long and grown, tired like a heart that had cried too long and gone quiet. The ship waited where he had left it, its lights blinking like tired eyes, its engines humming like a song sung by someone who had almost forgotten the words. They laid him inside and sealed the hatch, and the sky above began to fade into light again, into the soft pale glow of a rising star that had not shone here in many cycles. Erika looked down at the moon from the viewport, and saw the cracks in its surface, the quiet lines that marked where the seal had held, where the wound had closed. For now she wondered how long the silence would last, wondered if anything ever stayed buried forever, wondered if someday far away someone else would find this place and think it was safe. Vale stood at the back of the ship alone, his eyes on the floor, his thoughts tangled like smoke. He did not speak of medals, he did not ask for reports, he only whispered to himself names of those who would not return, names that would never be spoken by the council, never written in the records, never carved into the stone of heroes. When they reached the orbiting station, no one cheered. No one welcomed them with lights and song. The doors opened slow and quiet. The medics came in and took Reed gently, their hands careful, their faces unsure, not because they feared him, but because they did not understand him, and that made them walked behind the stretcher, not as a soldier, not as a warrior, not even as a survivor. She walked as a witness, someone who had seen something no one should see, someone who had heard the true meaning of silence, someone who now carried a piece of the dark inside her heart. The council refused to meet her eyes when she spoke. They did not want to hear about the thing beneath the stone. They did not want to see the scars the cube had left. They did not want to believe that the human they had mocked had saved them also. She said nothing. She only looked at them with eyes that no longer belonged to the girl who had first entered the chamber, no longer belonged to the warrior who had trained under golden banners. Her eyes were older now, her voice quieter, her heart harder. She visited Reed every day as he lay still in the healing chamber. Sometimes he whispered her name, sometimes he smiled, sometimes he cried without sound, and each time she held his hand and told him the same thing. You were right, they laughed, but you were right. Time passed, but the memory did not fade. The moon remained sealed, but the dream returned, sometimes in flashes, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in screams. She learned to live with it, learned to breathe through the weight, learned to stand in silence and listen without fear. Around one night, when the stars were low and the wind outside the station was calm, she stood by the window and looked out across the black and felt it stir again, not loud, not Sharp, just a nudge, just a whisper, just a reminder that it was still there. She placed her hand against the glass and whispered a promise, not to forget, not to let others forget, not to let the next voice go unheard. And, somewhere far away in the dark, between stars, something old turned its face away from her and closed its many eyes and went back to sleep for now.